Welcome back to the Humble Marksman channel, the only gun channel here on YouTube dripping with that BDE. That's right, Big Dad Energy! I was excited about this one because I stole this joke from a coworker and you can use it in your next business meeting. What's the difference between a dilapidated bus stop and a lobster with breast implants? One is a crusty bus station and the other is a busty crustacean. Yes, it's horrible, and yes, I laughed too. But go ahead, steal it, it's yours. I'm David, and this is the Shadow Systems DR920L. And for those of you who aren't protocol droids and don't speak Shadow Systems, what that means is duty roll, 9mm 2020 variant long, which is a Glock 34 sized pistol. You should like this video and subscribe to this channel because if you do, you will be rewarded. Very soon I will be comparing how the DR920L shoots compared to the DR920P, which is their compensated version of the same gun that is basically the same dimension front to back. They share the same holster. I'm going to compare the effects of recoil on this compensated gun versus the non-compensated long slide model, but also be doing the same thing with the SIG Legion and the Spectre comp, so be sure to check that out. So for those of you who are not familiar, Shadow Systems is kind of a performance concealed carry brand, law enforcement type brand. That DR920P, I'm told, is actually in service as a gun on the hips of some of the tribal policemen in Oklahoma, which is kind of cool to think about. So if you go right now to the Shadow Systems website and look up this gun, I promise you there's going to be dudes with like visual tattoos and like slow motion, like racking rounds into the chamber and putting them in their holster, then like training on the range and stuff, because that's what everybody does when they market this kind of stuff. But ultimately, this, in my opinion, is a competition gun, and the only thing kind of holding it back from not being like a purebred competition gun is the fact the trigger comes about 5 pounds out of the box, and the sights are iron sights, black serrated rear with a high-vids night sight front, which is the same as all the rest of the Shadow Systems type guns. Now, for those of you who are not familiar, Shadow Systems is in Plano, Texas, so if you like your Glock style pistols made in America, they're a good one to check out. I've done other videos on the MR920, the Foundation series of guns, and the DR920P, so you can check all of those out if you want more information. Got started life as a Glock aftermarket company making parts for Glocks. In 2018, they introduced the MR918, which was their Glock 19 size performance concealed carry piece. They took customer feedback, incorporated it into the design, and updated it for 2020 with the MR920, which is still what's in production today. Later on, they introduced the DR920, which is a Glock 17 size, the XR920, which is a Glock 45 size, and eventually the CR920, which is their skinny little baby gun for concealed carry. And now the circle is complete with the Glock 34 sized gun. And there's a lot of commonality between like the performance concealed carry space and the competitive space, because all the stuff that competitive shooters were doing for years, Shadow basically took and put on all of their guns. It has the aggressive style grip, it has the relieved trigger guard, it has the little thumb rest deals on the slide, it has forward cocking serrations, and on this long slide version of the gun, the slide is about a country mile long, which gives you plenty of space to manipulate the slide, and from the front of the slide is where competitive shooters generally manipulate the pistol. Now, the barrels that Shadow Systems makes, and they do make the barrels themselves, are some of the most accurate Glock barrels that I have ever encountered. So zeroing an optic on a Shadow gun is always fun because you can always print itty bitty groups. And not only that, the barrels look cool. They're like this bronze tin coated with like a spiral fluting design, so it really kind of helps with your Instagram flex. And to promote flexing on Instagram, which is basically the main point of buying these handguns, right, is this butler cut or whatever you call it on the slide makes the gun sit up just like this on surfaces so you can photograph it and video it. I sincerely doubt that's why they put that there, but I sure appreciated the feature. In my opinion, what makes the Shadow guns perform really, really well is honestly the frame and trigger ergonomics. Now, the frame has a adjustable point of aim backstrap style system. This is set up for kind of the neutral one, so I am not a native Glock shooter anymore. This is set up more like any other gun, so my index is perfect with the gun. And they also have like a 1911 grip angle. And of course they have the Glock style backstrap as well. There's two ways a pistol kind of sits in your hand. There's the geometry, which is really relative between the shape of the grip tang and the shape of the relief under the trigger guard. And Shadow gets this very, very correct. The grip is still a little bit blocky like all of the Glock style guns, but it provides a nice ledge to pull on front to rear, and that's how you shoot a pistol well, is squeezing front to rear with your strong hand. And it allows your thumb to get nice and high so you can get onto the slide release if you need to, but it creates a nice pocket for your support hand as well. There's this little ledge on the slide where you can use it as an index point for your support hand thumb or a memory pad for your trigger finger. There's traction on the front of the trigger guard, so for you guys who like to go finger over the guard, you've got an extra little bit of purchase there. The frame is set up in such a way that it is common with all of the other Glock 34 holsters. When I shot an indoor IDPA match recently and I used my Glock 34 holster and there was no problem with it. On the gun, it comes with a plastic mag well that basically is held in by a cross pin, and they give you all the punches that you need to work on the Shadow system in the bag that it comes in. And the bag it comes in is a nice pistol bag. There's also 2 of the Magpul style 17 round magazines, and those work really well with this magwell because number one, the opening is gigantic, but the thicker base on the Magpul mags act as a good bumper pad to land in a magwell. The slide finish is really nice and holds up really well to wear. My old carry gun, which is the MR920, I carried for a couple years. The finish held up on that very well. I actually used this gun to compete at an indoor IDPA match near my house, and what that consisted of is I took the gun to the range and I zeroed the optic, then I showed up and raced and just hoped that, you know, being an old Glock 34 shooter, I figured that maybe it would all come back to me, and honestly it didn't take very long at all before I was kind of one with the gun. The gun shoots very, very flat, and it wasn't long until midway through the night I was beginning to stack rounds on top of each other, and in some cases actually in the same hole, to the point where we got to play Count the Grease Ring, which is cool when it happens, but it also slows down scoring. The traction on the gun as well as the frame really kind of plants the gun in your hand, and I had complete control over the gun. It was great. The big magwell was appreciated on the reloads, which is kind of a big piece of the IDPA game because it seems like all the stages are 18 rounds these days. These Shadow guns are a little bit lighter than their Glock counterparts, which actually helped them sort of balance a little bit better, and I kind of like how this gun handles. Like, it was very nostalgic. Like, my first like IDPA specific competition gun was a Glock 34, and when I started shooting carry optics in USPSA, I used a Glock 34, so this was very nostalgic to that, but it just kind of better in most of the ways.
Think about how awesome your carry gun is. Now consider that it's lonely. But it doesn't have to be. You can give your gun a buddy with the new Veta Holster Side Tuck holster. It's like a magazine as the sidekick for your gun.
And this thing's like really comfortable. I feel like I could like touch my toes or maybe like exercise. I mean, I'm not gonna, but I feel like I could.
It's available in all sorts of cool colors like this Tiffany blue. Oh, come on. Way to go, dummy. You ordered the non-RMR cut one for your optic-equipped gun and then ruined it with your Dremel and your pocket knife like nobody was gonna know, and you ruined my product shots.
Oh, come on, it works great. Nobody's gonna know. It's one of my favorite holsters now.
It's the internet, dummy. Everyone's gonna know. I mean, look at that. Wait, is that a Veta Holsters Cobra belt made from 100% real Cobras?
I'm not sure they're made of Cobras, but yeah.
Those belts are awesome.
Yeah, I know they're awesome.
Veta Holsters.
So I have one of my old Glock 34 competition pistols right here, and I'll talk about why I actually prefer the Shadow over the Glock. Now, first and foremost is the slide work. The forward serration on the Glocks, like the Glock finish, is very slippery, and the serrations aren't anything to write about. The MOS plates have been notorious for coming warped or all that kind of stuff. The Shadow cut seems to be more squared away in that regard. The frame, the geometry is okay on the Glock, but the traction kind of sucks, and the triggers out of the box are serviceable, but they're honestly not all that different in the Shadow guns either. But most importantly on why I don't like the Glock over the Shadow is based on how the grip kind of comes together. Now, Glock puts these indentation thumb rest kind of things, which promotes you holding the gun like this, and that's why all the dudes on the internet say they shoot Glocks left, is because they put their thumb in that indentation, because it creates a huge air gap right here. The Shadow gun, because it's made in America, doesn't have to put the thumb rest in there for the ATF points, so it promotes a more natural grip, and the shape of the beaver tail kind of gets your thumb right up there where it's supposed to be. Coupled with better trigger geometry, the trigger face on the Glock pistols kind of goes like this, and the trigger safety dingus kind of presses into the center of the pad of your finger, whereas the Shadow trigger face is broader and the dingus basically goes away as you pull the trigger. It promotes a more straight to the rear trigger press. For somebody who doesn't know how to shoot guns and doesn't have a bunch of training, they will immediately pick up the Shadow and likely have an easier time connecting with their targets than the Glock, which requires a very specific grip that the grip itself doesn't doesn't kind of tell you how to hold in any sort of way. It takes somebody to tell you how to hold a Glock in order to extract the maximum potential from it. I still really like my 34s for nostalgia reasons really, but if I were to pick one of the two to compete with, it would definitely be this one. Now the trigger we talked about, it's easy to pull straight to the rear, but the press is not going to, be too remarkable. It is a 5-pound pull on my trigger scale, and the wall is pretty firm, very crisp, and then you keep loading up pressure, and eventually there's a tiny little bit of creep that you can kind of see but not really feel, and then there's a small bit of over travel to finish the throw. The reset similarly is pretty short right there, very tactile, very audible. It pushes your finger forward and kind of helps with the reset just like the Glock triggers do. So for those of you guys who like the character of the Glock trigger, it's all there for you. The optics cut is kind of interesting. It is patent pending. They have a shorter extractor than say the Glock, which has a plunger that goes all the way from the rear up to the extractor. That's been abbreviated, it's held in place with kind of a roll pin so that they can use long screws to secure optics into the slide. So it gets the optic down a little bit into the slide, but more importantly, they provide 3 sets of screws and spacers that go at the rear of the optics. So it creates kind of a press fit into the optic pocket, and the high strength screws really kind of hold the optics put. While this gun only has a couple hundred rounds on it, like I say, my old carry gun is the MR920, and it's got thousands of rounds on it with the same optic mounted, and it never had a problem. So while this gun is a T&E gun, it was sent to me by the guys at Shadow Systems. It's not going back. Whatever we have to do to make that happen, guys, we're gonna do it, because this is, in my opinion, a gun that will be relevant for competition and is gonna be going in my safe. For so those of you who like low bore axis striker fire guns, like the geometry on these frames is really good, and I think that this could be a contender in that category. It brings me back to my early competitive shooting days, and it's honestly quite capable. I had a good time with it at IDPA, and I think it'd make a great IDPA gun. If you got any questions, sound off in the comments. I appreciate you guys, and I'll catch you on the next one. Thanks, guys.